The developmental concept I chose for this project is language development with an emphasis on language explosion. Language development is a super important part of child development. Language allows us to understand and communicate with those around us, which is crucial as we live in a very social world. Children are born with the ability to distinguish the human voice from other sounds. They are especially receptive of their mother's voice. Children are also born with the ability to become specialists in whichever language they are immersed in. This is due in part to synaptic blooming and pruning. There are four main components of language development: phonology, semantics, grammar, and pragmatics. Phonology is the sounds of our language. A phoneme is the smallest sound that can change the meaning of a word. In English, we have 44 phonemes, including letter sounds and combinations such as th or. Semantics refers to vocabulary and word meaning. Grammar governs the arrangement of words into sentences. It consists of two parts: morphemes and syntax. Morphemes are the smallest meaningful units of language, or grammatical markings of meaning. They include things such as root words and suffixes that change the word tense. For example, lifted has two morphemes: lift, which means to pick up, and ed, which means the action took place in the past. Syntax is the rules of arranging and organizing words into sentences. Syntax keeps us from sounding like Yoda and instead makes our sentences sensical. Finally, pragmatics refers to the social use of speech and includes things such as tone of voice and interaction rituals. Language development is often broken up into two periods: prelinguistic and linguistic. The prelinguistic period extends from birth to 10 to 12 months of age. In this time period, babies produce sounds that resemble language. From 2 to 3 months, babies do cooing, which tends to be a bunch of vowel sounds strung together. Babbling follows and allows the addition of consonant sounds and usually occurs between 4 and 6 months. From 3 or 4 months forward, babies can participate in joint attention, which is when the baby focuses on the same object, event, or person as the caregiver. The prelinguistic period is also a sensitive period, so it's very important that babies are exposed to plenty of language during this time. The linguistic period begins when the child begins saying their first words, which usually happens around 12 months of age. Children often use holophrases, which are single words that represent entire sentences. For example, a toddler might point at a dog and say, "Doggy," which can be translated to mean something like, "Look, I see a dog." Eventually, toddlers progress past this and begin to speak in a similar fashion to adults. They go from holophrases to two-word sentences to full sentences. At the same time, children are learning a lot about word extension, or the proper limits of words. They are pretty good at learning how broadly or narrowly a word applies, though errors are sometimes made. Once children begin speaking, they start to learn a lot of new words in a really short time period. This is often referred to as the language explosion. Children usually begin to speak at around 12 months of age. The few words they can speak are usually important people, objects, or easy action words like go. By 2 years of age, children speak between 250 and 350 words, with an average of 307. By 2.5 years, they're at 570. The language explosion really takes place between the ages of 3 and 6 years old, however. Children increase from speaking roughly 600 words to speaking several thousand. By the age of 6, they can speak anywhere from 6,000 to 15,000 words. This range is due in part to different methods of measuring children's vocabulary, and also to the amount of language children are exposed to. Adequate conversation and immersion in language can help to greatly increase a child's vocabulary. During the language explosion, acceleration in language acquisition is pretty continuous. Children learn a lot of easy words really quickly and then learn other variations of the words as well. Parents also play a role in their child's language development in the way that they talk to and with them. The words children first begin to learn are the ones frequently used by the adults around them, especially their parents. Adults who engage in frequent child-directed speech with their kids can actually speed up early language learning. After children have developed a higher language capacity, speaking to them in the same way you would speak to adults is extremely helpful. Adult-directed speech speeds up language learning from this point forward. Acceleration of language learning continues through the end of the language explosion period, at which point it slows down dramatically. However, children still learn a lot of new words after this, albeit at a slower rate. By the time children reach late adolescence, they can speak an average of 60,000 words. Children use a lot of tools to help them learn new words extremely quickly. One of these is fast mapping. Burke refers to fast mapping as the ability of children to build bridges between new words they hear and concepts they already know. They can do this even with only a quick experience with the word, such as an adult mentioning it in passing. Children get better and better at fast mapping as they age, and by the time they're in preschool, they can even fast map multiple words at once. Another set of useful tools children use are constraints. Constraints are assumptions children, and sometimes adults, make to limit the possible different meanings to new words. There are a few different types of these constraints. First, there's the object scope constraint. This is the assumption that words refer to whole objects rather than parts. The child learns that the word elephant refers to the animal itself and not, say, its ear. It makes learning new words and associating them much easier, especially when much of the child's early vocabulary comes from describing the world around them. A second type is the mutual exclusivity constraint. By using this constraint, children assume that words refer to one category and one category only. Thus, when they hear a new word and see a new object, they assume the word must refer to that object. For example, if I were to show a child these three drawings and ask them to tell me which one is a whoople, they would most likely be able to guess it correctly because they already know what cats and bunnies are. Well, maybe not from my drawings because they're not very good, but that's not the point. Finally, another is the taxonomic constraint. This is the assumption that words can refer to categories of like objects. Two things with similar characteristics can share a categorical name even if those two things are not exactly the same. This is how a child learns that a Chihuahua and a Golden Retriever are both dogs, even if they don't look the same. This can also help explain why some kids call many different types of furry four-legged animals doggy. To sum it all up, language learning is a very important aspect of a child's development. People need to be able to communicate to survive living in this social world. Children are very good at learning languages, and they use a lot of different tools to help them do this. They learn words really fast and effectively with relatively few errors. And here are my references. They're also available on the script page. Thank you.